This is update for September 2, 2023, day 556 of the war and of the date update. Also update for catch-up update for September 1. So as always, I'm going to start with general news, general update. It's going to be fairly short. There's not really much going on. And then I'm going to switch to the front line in Ukraine, where it's also not much going on. But nevertheless, just to chronicle all of the changes, to keep everyone updated, I just decided to make this video today. So first, Russia shipped training airplanes to Iran for training pilots for Su-35. So if you remember, there were rumors that Russia sold those Su-35 to Iran. And then it took like the deal fell through and so on. There were those kind of rumors, but it appears that the sale is real and Su-35 are coming to Iran. It's just probably it's delayed relative to the initial expectation, but the delivery of the training aircraft, I think that those are Yak 130. Is a clear sign that Su-35 are coming, because this jet training airplanes are used to train pilots for Su-35. Then in terms of Su-35, in terms of its quality, just kind of like brief assessment, it's sort of rough equivalent of F-16 latest blocks. In some ways it's better, in some ways it's worse. So in terms of maneuverability and speed and altitude is probably a little bit better, but avionics and radar is definitely worse, and I would say missiles are also worse. So probably net slightly worse, but close enough that it can sort of have a fighting chance against F-16. Then in other news, in Niger, going back to that place, it looks like French embassy has been blockaded by the Nigerian army or armed forces, whatever you call them, rebels. And so the confrontation escalation is definitely going up, and there's very clear push there to push away, first of all, French ambassador, and then also French troops. As I mentioned before, there's about 1,500 French troops stationed in Niger. Then there is ongoing escalation, as I mentioned before, between Belarus, Russia, and then Baltic states, which is Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and also then Poland, because this is just kind of like one, call it big front line or potential future front line. So the Belarus was complaining that Polish helicopter flew into Belarus territory, about 1.2 kilometer in depth of Belarus territory, and then returned back. And obviously, that's another sign of escalation. We'll see what happens out of it, but it's definitely situation is tense, and it has tendency towards escalation overall. As I mentioned before, there were allegations of UAVs launched from Estonia. Then there was also allegation against Latvian border guards that they walked into the Belarus territory and so on. So things definitely tense, and exchange with Poland, or all Polish demands to remove Wagner Group from Belarus, and then counter demands from Belarus to remove all of the Western troops from Poland and Baltic states. So things are definitely on the confrontational path. Whether they're gonna turn into something real is yet to be seen. I don't think that either side, well, I would say would be totally insane for Russia to do to actually open, call it second front, because Russia barely can handle front line in Ukraine. So, but you never know, as they say. Now let's switch to the situation in Ukraine. I'm gonna do quick walk through the front line, but before I do that, so there are more clear signs of exhaustion of the mobilization potential in Ukraine, or I would say probably slightly differently, where there is very clearly that there is not enough people who are willing to go and fight at this point. And a lot of that is coming actually mm, um, from Ukrainian political top. There's non-stop corruption scandals rocking Ukraine, and Ukrainian people, population observing that, and then sort of natural response is like, okay, why I'm going to die for this? This is not worth it. That's just especially now when you have all of the ones that are sort of more willing to sacrifice already on the front line. So the other sort of you can think about the population sort of kind of like in the layers, right? Now you have layers where it's like, okay, what do I have in it for me? The question is the following: from the sort of remaining layers of population, and they don't see anything for themselves, so they're not willing to sacrifice. And I would say there's no reason to blame them. It's really coming from the problems are, starting at the top. As they say, fish always rots from the top, and that's where the root cause of all of these problems. And related to this, basically, two people, sort of two, talking heads from Ukrainian political top, they were both saying, we need to basically loosen up standards, and people who have sort of have some medical conditions, then the prior to this they were not called into army. Now they will be called into army, and maybe they will sort of serve in support roles and so on. And then also there's a tightening screws on also kind of like a corruption related to faking medical all of the disease and so on. So there's this attempt to tighten the screws without actually fixing the problem that demotivates people, and it's just not gonna work. This is the crust of this whole issue is you know the sort of remaining population is not willing to sacrifice for what they see, what's being done by Ukrainian political top, and that's going to be bigger and bigger challenge as sort of time passes and as losses mount. That's part of the strategic dead end that Ukraine is facing. I mentioned this before. Russian side is fully aware of this, and this is their clear strategy is basically bleed Ukraine wide, and basically let Ukraine exhaust its population in this war, and sort of have a victory by simply winning that way in sort of brutal force attack. Let's put this way. And so far, this is there's as I said before, within the current paradigm, there is no solution to this problem at the moment. The only two solutions is one is more technological help for Ukrainian army, basically assuming everything else remains the same, right? So basically more heavy equipment, more sophisticated equipment, which can create much stronger, bigger technological advantage over the Russian forces. So that's one pass, sort of like extensive pass. And then there is intensive pass, which is pass of the quality, is changing the whole, Ukrainian military top, better training, better organization of troops, just actually creating new weapons, which is Ukraine is totally capable of, or used to be at least, and it's not being, it's intentionally being not sort of discouraged, and there were all sort of barriers erected by Ukrainian government to prevent, private businesses, private capital from building weapons, because the problem that with what Ukraine gets from the West, some of it is great and useful, but significant portion of it is either military junk such as Leopard 1 tanks, T-55s that Ukraine got from Slovenia. Like there's a lot of that military junk that Ukraine gets, or it's sort of simply irrelevant for this type of war. This this anti-mine UAVs that are really designed for patrolling roles in occupied countries, but they're not really designed for frontline roles or anything like that, and so they're basically inadequate in their armor protection and the weapons and so on. So there's a lot of that, and if Ukraine able to produce weapons on its own territory, there is sort of direct feedback loop between the fighting forces and the sort of manufacturer producers, and there is potential, if it's, let's say it's private, it has there's no how to say monopolization, there is no overhead, there is initiatives, there is entrepreneurship that really creates ability to quickly iterate and create correct and right weapons for the front line. This obviously totally that ability is totally destroyed by Ukrainian political top, and that's, as I said, that's just not available option, and I would argue that without that option, Ukraine will not be able to win this war in the long run, unless, as I said, Ukraine gets, I don't know, 500 tanks, couple thousand infantry fighting vehicles, and let's say 1,000 155 millimeter howitzers and so on, which is I don't believe it's happening in principle. So right now this is where it goes, and I think it's gonna get worse before there will be any positive changes for Ukraine. Now let's switch to walk through the front line. I'm gonna do it in a clockwise fashion, as I always do. So the situation along the state border remains more or less the same, typical exchanges, but nothing sort of major or nothing of interest. Now let's jump to the North Luhansk front line. Things here are also the same. Again, this Russian tactical attacks in this area. I no idea what's the purpose of that. In my view, it's just a road to nowhere. But nevertheless, Russian command continues this. Again, as I said, it's tactical attacks. It's not any kind of offensive. Now let's look at North Donbass front line. So here things actually changed radically. Looks like Ukrainian command decided to renew its attack or its operation to encircle Bakhmut and basically liberate Bakhmut by encircling Russian troops around it. So as you can see, the idea is fairly primitive. Is basically push from the north, push from the south, and create encirclement or threaten of encirclement. The real encirclement will never happen. So far in this war, I don't don't recall single instance of actual real encirclement happening of either Russian or Ukrainian troops. It's just the troops are too mobile. The command is too inflexible, too far removed from real troops on the front line, so they cannot react in time. So encirclement, theoretically, practically impossible. Theoretically, it's possible, but from all practical perspective, it's not possible for either Ukrainian or Russian side. So the whole goal is to create a threat, credible threat, and force withdrawal of Russian troops from Bakhmut. As I said, I'm extremely skeptical about this because you really need much different level of skills, weapons, command, everything, communication, coordination to be successful at offensive operations. In Ukrainian command, just generally, Ukrainian army is not there from all perspectives. The only place that it's there is motivation of the Ukrainian soldiers, but that's the only ingredient. You really need everything else in place as well, and everything else is not there. So again, Ukrainian command renewed attacks in the south of Bakhmut and north of Bakhmut. So far, there are no real sort of advances or no real achievements on either in the north or in the south. So things basically remain status quo. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line. Things here are also the same approach by Russian command, where they try to create credible threat for Ukrainian troops around Avdiivka and force withdrawal. That's why they renewed their attack from the Spissky salient. Again, goes nowhere. Status quo remains. Also attacks against Marinka, which, as they are as standard as this war from the day one of the war, and with zero results so far. And probably will the way it's done, it's again road to nowhere for Russian side. Now let's look at Zaporizhya front line. So here Ukrainian command is basically focusing on this sector around Robotyne. It's trying to exploit this success in liberating Robotyne. Ukrainian troops mostly focus actually on attacking and liberating Verbove, not on Novopropopivka. There is some success in sort of, how to say, approaching. Basically, Ukrainian troops are on outskirts of Verbove. However, there is a problem because it's sort of like in a valley, so Russian troops are basically south and east of it, and it's like commanding higher ground. So even though Ukrainian troops are sort of on approaches of Verbove, it's very difficult to hold on to it because you basically constantly shelled from the top, from the higher ground. So it's in some way difficult situation and I would say is probably not the right move forward. But this is the path of least resistance, most obvious, because then Ukrainian command can say, "Oh well, we liberated another village," but arguably it's not about the villages; it's about breaking through the defensive lines in indecisive way, and that's totally different objective than what's being done right now. But it is what it is. So the Ukrainian command is continuing attacks in this area, the area around the Staromlynivka, Velika Novosilka. For now is on the pause. Unclear to me why. Potentially that the reserves are not there to continue operations on both in both sectors. I don't know. This is just my pure speculation at this point. Now let's move to the last section of the front line along the Dnipro River. Things remain sort of the same. Ukrainian troops holding this bridgeheads, but not there's no any attempt to break out of those bridgeheads and make sort of decisive moves into the territories that are controlled by the Russian troops at this moment. So again, also in my view, this is one of the opportunities that out there. I mentioned that this 205th Brigade is extremely poorly commanded. The quality of command is terrible here, so that's a huge positive for Ukrainian side, but for unknown reasons to me, there is no attempt to really exploit opportunities here. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time.